welcome back to Pax Europiana. This is now the road from amazing Dhermi, the village of Dhermi. I will show you some of these beautiful parts of the coast. It's where the Greek minority traditionally lives. Many of them have left already, gone to the beautiful Greece themselves. They are back in the summer, and some of them live, of course, here. And it's one of the minority issues which is vexing the situation between Greece and Albania. Together, of course, with the lack of the demarcation of the sea border and the non-recognition of Kosovo by Greece, and a lot of cultural prejudice against Albanians, which unfortunately are prevalent in Greece. I'm calling the Greece authorities, obviously, please recognize Kosovo, settle the sea border with Albania and Greece, and also recognize the Chamaria genocide. And let's overcome the tragic past of this region, and let's have good minority rights for everybody, for the Albanians in Greece, for the Greeks in Albania. And so we can produce a better world, a better Europe, a Europe which lives at peace and is prosperous. And the answer to the Russian war must be more unity in Europe. So the logic is that Albania joins the European Union. And of course, North Macedonia and Montenegro, the three NATO allies, because they are ready for that. And it's much better for the Greek minority in Albania and everybody here in the region if everybody is in the European Union. That's the logic. And abusing minority rights by somehow claiming that Albania is not ready for the EU is absolutely wrong. We should not abuse minorities for political games in Athens or Serbia, as some sadly do, with all these minority issues of the Serbs in Kosovo or the Albanians in Serbia, which are so tragically mistreated by Serbia. But also, and then the Greek state has to recognize minority languages, like Albanian language, and of course recognize that the actions and the genocidal deeds which they have done as a revenge to a perceived collaboration of Albanians with the Italian fascists, where in reality it was the Greek fascist state which has rejected then the Italian attack, obviously. But the Albanians were just somewhere in the middle, lost in translation. They were already occupied colony by Italy, and what was their big agency in that respect? And also then to claim the Cham Albanians for the crimes of the German Nazis in World War II against the Greeks, which were of course horrendous. I think it's all totally out of proportion, and it's totally not justified that we somehow then describe that the poorest of all are then the Albanians somewhere in between, and they are to blame for the crimes of the Italians or the Germans. I mean, get a grip. And here actually there is a big boom in tourism now going on, and if you really want to support the Greeks living here, come to visit these beautiful places. I call the Greeks, the Italians and the Austrians. See, it's very beautiful. There's now a big boom in the last 10 years. I was not here for 10 years. You see a lot of renovation. The old town, the Chora, as they call it in Greek language, is now polyorea with a luxury hotel and a lot of renovations. And that's ultimately what periphery regions like this, with all their minority and other complexities in ethnic and historical terms, what they really need is a tourism boom in the region where it makes sense to live again, to use the property and to come back from Greece and to settle here and to keep the life of the minority active. This should be the policy of Greece, and not creating issues and blocking Albanian sea border settlement or claiming that the Albanians mistreat the Greeks. Here, obviously, here's Greek language. I was just at the Greek cemetery above Dhermi, and there are several of these villages, like Borch, like Himara, the most famous, Saranda, and several others. I don't know all the names. I will maybe see them in the future, and I would be most happy if that's possible to come back at this beautiful southern coast, which the Greeks have tried to take militarily after the First and the Second World War. They were obviously not successful in that one, and now it's a minority region. Obviously, it's like we have many, like in the north of Kosovo, and we have so many of them in Europe. and we need to have European settlements in terms of all these minority issues, and that's the way to deal with all that issues. There's not a lot Greeks living in the south of Albania, so it's not necessary to have a separate autonomous status like we have with the South Tyroleans or like I propose in the north of Kosovo. But we can do, of course, better for all of them inside the European Union, and also to recognize the language rights as the Albanians have done, and the Greeks have not done with Albania, where there is 1 million Albanians living in Greece actually. And that's of course a much bigger human rights issue, and then there are very few who are left here, because many have already Greek passports, are EU citizens. But of course, again, if they would be in the European Union, also their properties and the whole region, the whole country here would be much better, of course, for all of them. I've now started this debate on Twitter with my friends from Greece about a new historical narrative to end this kind of Greek-centric worldview which they propose, and we really have to have a debate with the Greeks. What's wrong with them now in the war against Russia and in the Ukraine war of 2023? The Greeks have been relatively decently supporting Ukraine, and that was very good. But still they have not recognized Kosovo, and they mix everything up with Cyprus. The argument is always, if we recognize Cyprus, then if we recognize Kosovo, then there will be north of Cyprus Republic recognized as well, and so on and so on. While they always forget that they have made the coup d'etat in 74, the Greeks. They wanted to have the unification, the enosis. That was the moment where the Turks have intervened. And we need obviously also to respect the minority rights of the Turks in Cyprus. It's not going like this, that we support unification of Cyprus on the cost of the Turks living there. It's not like that. There can be a settlement for Cyprus, as I have said so many times already. A united Cyprus inside NATO, the European Union, based on a German federal constitution, with Bundesländer and with federalism of a united Cyprus inside the EU, NATO and the Euro, and of course with the NATO bases from the Turks, from the Americans, from the British and maybe others, to be there permanently, and everybody to be secure under European law. We are certainly not endorsing any kind of reconquista or ethnic cleansing, which some of the Greeks seem to want. That's certainly not happening. And we can of course settle the Cypriot issues inside the Western institutions very well. But first of all, the Greek Cypriots must agree to join NATO. And that's obviously not a big issue, because militarily the island is anyhow fully NATOized with these three major military bases of the Turks, the British and the Americans. And of course that should be kept like this because of the security of the Eastern Mediterranean and of Israel. And that's very important. Good. It's very beautiful here. In the history it played a huge role, this area, in the Italian-Greek War of the 1940s. And of course it always will be an amazing tourism jam. And we are now in this area which under communism was a prisoner camp, because Enver Hoxha has never allowed a coastal development out of fear of invasions. He was sure everybody wants to have this country. Now we are basically only interested in tourism, and the world never was so interested in Albania. But obviously in the history the Italians always wanted the coast, the Greeks wanted this coast, and the plan was after the first, in 1912, during the First World War, after the First World War, in the Interwars War, and during the World War II, was basically to erase Albania from the map and divide it between Yugoslavia, Greece and Italy. And obviously this dynamic of threat has led to this paranoid communism, which then was for 50 years the scourge of the Albanians. Because here, now it's a holiday paradise, but everything here is called camp, camp, camp. The Ruga I Campit, the street to the camp, because it was a prisoner camp. There was no other form of settlement here, but a prisoner camp, and it was very, very harsh and brutal conditions, similar like in the mines or in the swamps of Fier. Albanian communism was one of the brutal regimes, most brutal regimes against their own population in European history, and it was terrible. Then when everything ended and collapsed in 91, peace came and prosperity took a long time. It's just now the first decade which is relatively decent development, and you see now the prices are already reaching European level. There's luxury here at the beaches, and you have to check it out yourself. It's quite impressive and I really like it. But now after 2 days we are heading back towards the beautiful Honduras, and we are crossing the mountains and we are seeing this amazing Logará pass, and hopefully there will be a tunnel soon. But this unique pass will always be a major touristic site. Whenever it's not very efficient for the people coming just for the weekends from Tirana to their beautiful beach resorts, but for the tourists it will be always one of the most scenic rides along the Adriatic. Crossing the Logará mountains is something very special, and I'm looking forward, and I will show you some of the road impressions on the way up. And I'm very grateful up there. You see this amazing scenery and the beauty of the south of Albania, a very special part of Europe, and it will be even much more special once it's better accessible, once the wastewater and the railway, the water, the electricity situation is all clarified with the major inflow of the European Union funds under the Western Balkan Investment Initiative, which for the first time really now, in the light of the Ukraine war, the Europeans are serious with the Western Balkans and starting to fund the reconstruction of the energy, which I was advocating 25 years ago when it was the Balkan wars ended. I already called for a huge investment drive in the Europeanization of the infrastructure, and it would have been much better, much cheaper to do it from the beginning, and we had much better result if we put what Mrs. Loyola de Palacio has estimated, the $500 billion of cost for the infrastructure in 2000. We should have placed all the wastewater, water, electricity and infrastructure, railway, highways and the digital infrastructure in one big package and fund it over the next 25 years. And as we have done it with Eastern Germany, with Aufbau Ost, and we would be finished basically now with all these things. And now it took 25 years to do a bit here and there and as little as possible, or what of this kind of patchwork thing we have done. And now only in 2022, when the shit hit the fan and the Russian invaded Ukraine, the logic was of course to also do something for the Western Balkans. And as the Western Balkans is still not able to join the European Union, where all these funds would be anyhow transferred, at least parts of these funds were now released for the Western Balkans, first time in history, to fix all the things we should have fixed 25 years ago. So you can really question the kind of wisdom of some of the decision makers in the European Union, but that's how it is, unfortunately. And at least the good thing, now it's coming and it's moving and we are getting there, and that's very positive and it's needed, because the infrastructure costs of this region are simply too high for the taxpayer base of this region, because we have lost about maybe 40% of the population in the last 25 years already. And now, of course, the taxpayers and the productivity is not high enough to really pay the huge burden of infrastructure. You see some of these coastal bunkers which were built to protect Albania from the perceived invasion threat, which never materialized. And what it really did, it was turning Albania in the largest communist outdoor prison camp ever in history. The people here were basically trapped inside the political system. If you fled, your family was punished and you yourself received the capital punishment for a flight for the Republic. And this was the tragic of this country. And now the first years, still, governance is not perfect, but at least it's moving forward and the political situation is stabilized on a more or less one-party system for the last 12 years and ongoing, I guess. This does lead to another, of course, problematic political situation when you don't have a working opposition. You have a government monopoly on power and projects. That is also very complicated reality of this country, but at least you have a massive progress now in terms of EU funding and also of capital inflows. But I reiterate, this all necessitates a currency back, because what you have now is a massive increase, contrary to the currency crises of Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia all losing significant value. And the one currency in the Western Balkans which is not back to the euro, that's the Albanian lek, has now increased the value dramatically from 130 to 100, close to 100 now. Basically you just have to put 2 zeros away from the lek amount, and then you have the euro amount, which leads to massive inflation and cost increases, and of course to a decrease of the competitiveness of the small but hopefully developing emerging tourism industry and export sector. And this is of course also one of the reasons why many people simply say they cannot afford to stay here and they leave. And that's something where I have called since years now for a currency back to the euro and also for the eurozation. And here you will see amazing, that's the road where they will work towards the tunnel to emerge from. Here you see this huge tourism development, really tremendous works which are ongoing here. The whole coast in the south, a new coastal road which you see here is already partly opened. Then you see this green coast development, it's really big and quite impressive. There will be a whole new city developed here in the north of Dhermi. Impressive. That's the richest Albanian entrepreneur, Samir Mane, is building this huge and tremendous place. And that's basically the part of the elite tourism of Albania. You will see also the Flora Bay will develop with all these coastal installations. They will be the big marina of the rich and famous of the Adriatic, and here is the Ionian paradise. Will be very accessible once the tunnel is ready, and this will be really amazing touristic asset to come. And already today is a lot of tourists here, not as much as should be. You see the coastal road here very well. Support Albania and the European Union. Albania adopt the euro, and please Greece recognize Kosovo and settle the sea border, and let's all be better Europeans, more united, as the answer to the Russian door. More to come from Pax Europiana in the coming days and weeks. Thanks a lot for listening.